On today's episode of Let's Talk Drones, we are doing a flight time and battery life review on the DJI Air 3. On paper, it's rated at 46 minutes, so we're going to go through all three different flight modes on the DJI Air 3 and see if it lives up to its billing. So, let's talk drones. What's up? It's Chris, the Drone Geek, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Drones. Let's Talk Drones is brought to you by The Droning Company, the #1 online resource for commercial remote pilots based in the United States. You can check them out online at thedroningcompany.com and across all major social media platforms. So I've been doing some pretty thorough testing on the DJI Air 3. My most recent video, which was the range test for the Air 3, got a mixed bag of feedback. We'll talk about more of what that feedback was and how I'm going to address some of the more negative feedback at the end of this video. Today, though, we are going to see if this lives up to its marketed billing of 46 minutes in the air. That's what DJI claims the Air 3 is capable of, and from what I've seen based upon past drones and this drone and flying it myself, I gotta say I'm pretty confident it will live up to the billing. What we're going to look at specifically is how that flight time might vary across the three different flight modes this has. This has city mode, normal mode, and of course, sport mode. So we're gonna go ahead and put this thing in the air in all three different modes on this video to see just how long this can stay in the air. Now, it's important to note as well when we fly the Air 3 that we won't have an entirely full battery. Between turning it on and then getting it in the air, it will have used up some of its battery life, but we're going to get as close of an estimate as we possibly can for an average time per flight mode. Okay, so now you'll see that we have the drone up in the air. We started with about 90% battery, so there will be an absolute margin of error here. We are gonna start in normal mode though, so that should be mitigated a little bit because this won't be drawing as much power off of the battery as, let's say, sport mode, for instance. And I'm not just gonna hover because I think that would be boring too. What I'm going to do is I'm gonna fly this around like you normally would if you were out flying your drone. And every once in a while, I'm just gonna go ahead and speed the clip up because I'm sure you don't wanna sit here and just watch whatever I fly around for 46 minutes 3 times potentially. So let's just go ahead and see what we can do here. That is a congregation of people over there next to the Jersey Shore Community Pool. So we're gonna stay clear of that. It also looks like they have a fire ladder set up for some reason or another. So we will definitely stay clear of that to make sure we don't put anybody in a dangerous predicament. So while I'm flying around this particular part of the park and sort of just displaying the abilities of the Air 3 while also gauging the flight time, I just want to let you in on how I'm going to roughly estimate the time that we lost on that 10% battery that we lost. So essentially what I'll do is I will take the average time, divide it by the percentage of battery left, and then parse that down. I'm not a mathematician, so I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I know the exact formula, but I'll sit down and figure out exactly how to come down to 10% of the battery equals roughly how many minutes. It won't be exact, obviously, but it'll be close enough that we can make a fair assumption about what the total flight time will be for the Air 3 in normal mode. Okay, so as you can see, we just zipped through a lot of this battery. We're at 36%, roughly 12 minutes left in the flight. I don't usually like to run my batteries down to close to 0 because of 2 reasons. One, that obviously opens the door for a lot of room for error, which we definitely don't want with this brand new drone. So we're not going to run it down close to 0. But number 2 is it's not good for the long-term health of the battery as I understand it. So we will go ahead and run this down to probably about 10 to 15% before we stop. And we will then assess the flight time on normal mode before we move on to cinema mode. No reason not to use our flying tripod camera to do this part of it. So we are down to 24% battery. We're not quite done yet. I did promise we're gonna drain this down to between 10 and 15%. But you can start to see on the screen recording that we are at about 24 minutes. Now, I've been sort of zipping around here really hard on the drone, probably a little bit more than you would in a normal drone flight, but again, this was rated at 46 minutes, and right now, with 23% battery left, we are at 24 minutes and 48 seconds and counting. So it's something to be very, very mindful of when you purchase the Air 3, where you think our flight time is gonna fall. Again, we still have about 9 minutes left rated on the battery controller, about 22%. So you've got about 7 to 10% before it's time to call it on this battery. So let's go ahead, run it down the rest of the way and see where we end up. It landed itself. I was gonna hand catch it to impress you, but we're down to 10% battery and it's gonna land itself since I returned it to home. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we saw here with the Air 3 and its battery life in normal mode. Okay, so after I put some thought into it, I realized that my math is still off. We started with the battery at 90%, so that's minus 10% right off the bat. Then we didn't even fly the whole battery, we flew it down to 10% capacity left, which means that we left 20% of the battery on the DJI Air 3 battery number 1 in normal mode. So if we take into consideration that the screen recording I did on the DJI RC2 totaled 29 minutes and 30 seconds, and then multiply that by 0.2, which is 20% of the flight that we didn't conduct on the battery, we come out to roughly 5 minutes and 54 seconds. So add that on to the 29 minutes and 30 seconds that we already had flown, and you come up with, I think, 35 minutes and 24 seconds, which is roughly 10 minutes less than we were promised by DJI marketing in normal mode. Now, again, take into consideration that I was ripping around here quite a bit. So it's not probably the way that you use it naturally in the field, but if you use your drone really hard, you are only probably going to get between 35 and 40 minutes, depending upon the conditions that you're flying in. And again, that's something that we talk about constantly here, is that marketed flight time is always in a lab setting. It's hardly ever done in an environment that you'll actually be flying in, and you almost never have perfect conditions in the field. So when they say 46 minutes, temper your expectations for it to be a little bit lower. In this case, in normal mode, we found it was around 35 minutes and 24 seconds. But you know, considering that we are running low on daylight right now, I don't think we have enough time to conduct a test on all 3 flight modes. So in this particular situation, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut cinema mode, because we've already established that in normal mode, you get around 35.5 minutes of flight time on a battery. So that being said, we know that cinema mode is probably gonna be a little bit more than that because it's less demanding on the battery, because it caps how fast and how quickly you can move around. So let's just go ahead and move into sport mode. Let's see what you get on a DJI Air 3 battery in sport mode. Okay, so we have the DJI Air 3 in the air, and this time we are starting with 100% battery, which is probably good, because it'll give us a more accurate indication as to how long we can fly this drone. So let's switch it into sport mode, not waste any more time. We're already down a percent. We're not gonna calculate that because this will be close enough anyway. And let's get moving. Now we will have to be careful flying around in sport mode. First of all, it is going to have a lot more attitude to it. It's gonna be a lot faster. It's gonna be a lot more capable to be nimble, but it also has all of the obstacle avoidance sensors off. Now, when I come up higher like this, around 200 feet, really don't have any problems in terms of obstacles at this point. There is a small airstrip outside of Jersey Shore. It's not a full-fledged airport, but sometimes paramotorists come out of that airport, and I just want to be mindful of them. If they're down at 200, even 300 feet like I'm at now, that's pretty abnormal for them. They're usually up higher by the time they go over town. So we'll go ahead. It's a beautiful way the sun is hitting the mountain there. If you want to call that a mountain, it's probably more of a hill to most of you. Still beautiful nonetheless. So let's go ahead and speed things up. Again, we don't want to sit here and just watch my flight for the next 30 minutes possibly, maybe even more, I don't know. That's why we're here testing it. So let's speed things up. We'll come back, check in when we need an update. Let's try not to hit myself with the drone. So, and also get the camera angle straight, I guess. So you may be wondering what that number up in the corner there is next to our battery percentage scale. That white number, if you're not familiar, is the estimate for how much flight time you have left on your drone. A lot of the newer DJI drones have this built into the DJI Fly app, so you can actually sort of guesstimate based upon what you're doing with that drone in that moment, how much time you have left on your battery. You'll see as we were ripping around, it said I had about 8 minutes, maybe 9 minutes left on the battery. Now that we're here hovering so that I can talk at you, we've got about 19 and a half minutes left. So it really is a real-time thing. You could just say, hey, why don't we look at that after the battery's dead and just see what we have left. It's not super accurate in terms of what you're doing in the moment. So as we use the drone and as we sort of figure out what type of use results in what type of flight time and what type of battery life, that's a good indicator as to what you have left, but it's not a great indicator as to, what the actual flight time would have been if we had finished the battery down to 0%. So let's keep going. So we are at about 12% battery right now. Gonna let this run down the last 2%. We've really flown this hard, so I'm not feeling too bad about just letting this hover for now the last 1% of the battery. So we'll just go ahead, wait this thing out and see where we end up. This was in sport mode. And sport mode is definitely more demanding on the battery, requires a lot more power compared to normal and especially cinema mode, which is a lot more controlled, a lot slower paced. So now it's asking me to land, so we are at 10%. We'll go ahead and confirm. We'll land the drone. Let's talk about what we found. Okay, so we just concluded our sport mode flight to see just how much battery life the DJI Air 3 has in its fastest and nimblest flight mode. So our total screen recording was 27 minutes and 23 seconds. When you take into consideration that we started with the battery at 100% and flew it down to 10%, that means that we had 10% battery left to fly the drone. If we take that time that we recorded, which was 27 minutes and 23 seconds, and we times that by 0.1, that's 10% of the flight time, we get 2 minutes 44 seconds, roughly. When we add that to our 27 minutes and 23 seconds, we come out to 31 minutes and 4 seconds, I believe. Roughly around 31 minutes overall though. So the DJI Air 3 marketed at 46 minutes flight time, and after 2 flights, one in normal mode and one in sport mode, we found that to be largely untrue, which is not surprising considering we know that the marketed flight times are usually exaggerated because they're generated in a lab setting, a setting that has almost perfect conditions. And then you take it and put it in the real world, in an environment where we don't have perfect settings. We've got breezes, we've got winds, we've got heat, we've got cold, we've got all of these factors playing into the lifespan of the battery on this drone and the performance of this drone, not to mention user input as well. It was not consistent, it was not perfect, but you know what? DJI came pretty darn close, all things considered, and for that I've got a lot of respect for them because their machines continue to impress, continue to put out high quality imagery as well as a high performance overall. So kudos to DJI on the Air 3. Did it meet the 46-minute flight time? No, but that's still a heck of a lot of flight time for a platform this small and this readily available. Now, before we wrap this video up, I would be remiss if I did not address some of the feedback that I got on my most recent review of the DJI Air 3, and that had to do with the flight range. Now, this is rated for 20 kilometers. That would be roughly about 12.4 miles. And I did not come anywhere close to that on my review. And that was maybe the chief complaint in the comment section, as well as some of the DMs that I got from you on my other social media accounts. You were disappointed that I didn't push it farther. I had to stay within compliance of FAA reg. I had to stay within compliance of VLOS because we are not in a BVLOS society quite yet. I do think that's coming, but we're not there yet. The other piece of feedback sort of came on the back of that whole idea of remaining in reg. A lot of you, most of you, called me out for not being within reg, for not maintaining visual line of sight because you believed that I could not see the drone. I'm here to tell you, I've got excellent eyesight, and I wanted to make sure everybody watching this knew it. All kidding aside, I know that the flight range test was not necessarily my best work. It was definitely a step up in quality in terms of how I format the reviews, and I'm really proud of that, but I do realize that I fell short as a pilot performance-wise. So I went back to the drawing board and I put some thought into how I want to handle that. I've decided I'm gonna go back and retest the flight range in a way that will allow me to maintain regulation with the FAA and their VLOS reg, as well as show you the full capabilities on the range for this drone. You'll find out more about my idea when we post the video in the next few days. Just stay patient, I promise it'll be worth it. But back to the idea of the battery life on the DJI Air 3. What did you think? Was this something that impressed you, or were you disappointed that it did fall short of its marketed spec sheet? Let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up icon down below as well. It helps me out a lot, gets this video out into the algorithm to more drone enthusiasts like yourself. If you really liked this video, you love drone content made by drones, about drones, and for drone pilots, this is the channel for you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and while you're at it, hit that bell icon. You'll get a notification every time I post a new video. Until next time, I'm Chris, the Drone Geek, and this is the DJI Air 3. We're out of here. See ya.
Yo, what you say? Steady screaming, YOLO, rockin' polo, we the fight. Everybody frontin' like they so straight.